So, welcome to Testimony Mountain. It is my absolute joy to be here with Reba, and she is here to tell her story and to share the things that God has done in her life. And I believe that it'll be meaningful to those of you who are survivors, that you are not alone. And it's important to bring these things into the light because that's where healing happens. Recently, I was talking to someone and they were like, isn't it easier just to keep those memories buried? And I personally do not believe that it is. Um, if we have the courage with the true family to bring it out into the light, there is so much opportunity for growth, for healing, and for all of our trauma to be worked into triumph. And that's really what we're about here at Testimony Mountain. So thank you, Reba. And I just want to open it up for you to share your heart and your story as you feel led.
Thank you. Really glad to be here, and thank you for doing what you do. Um, yeah, I'm 66 now, and I was about 63-ish when I really began to have some awarenesses. Things were not what I thought. I'd always known that there were some things that were really off, had a difficult upbringing and challenges there, that I started having some awareness that first came up military, and I'd had dreams of being in the military, but as far as what I knew in this consciousness, never been in the military, never had any connection at all. But there were some things that started coming through, and I started looking at that. And as I looked at that and moved a little bit further on, I began an awareness of satanic ritual abuse, and that was the big wow.
Mm.
I mean, this was all kind of weird, but as I began to feel that was a true experience that I had, um, I began to explore it. I grew up in a fundamental Christian church, my childhood, and I was very sincere in connecting with God, with Jesus, very heartfelt thing. As I grew, probably in my late teens, early 20s, I just expanded outward a little bit, and I moved out of fundamental Christianity into some of the more what I would call liberal Christian
Mhm.
churches. And then eventually ended up, the Bible I threw it away. I knew it cover to cover. I had underlined everything, and I was done with that, and got rid of it and started just exploring other things. Up until recently, I've looking at it again and having some new realizations, and I realized, I've always, through all of this, I prayed, and
Mhm.
when I prayed to God, it's like I had to clarify which God is praying to, because there's been a lot of programming against Jesus, and I can see this all over media. I can see it in conversations that there's a lot of programming against that, and I've been in groups that okay, if someone's going to talk about Christianity, then okay, trigger warning, we're going to talk about Jesus here. So
Yeah.
a lot of people have just really, that's a hot trigger, and so you stay away from that. You don't talk about it. But I would pray, define the God that I intended to pray to, and I didn't include Jesus in that, as I know I've got some heavy anti-Jesus programming. And even now, as I'm looking at the true family, which you and Transformations Community has brought up to me, and I've not really heard that before. But that's been helpful. Even, however, it's sometimes it's pretty murky, and I'm not sure that I'm looking at the real thing, and I have to back up a little bit and, okay, now is this the real Jesus I'm looking at? And
Mhm.
sometimes it feels like he is. Sometimes I'm not sure, and so I just revisit these things
Mhm.
periodically. Going back a little bit in my early 20s, I think I was used a lot with military programming. I think first SRA as a young child was very intense programming, that Illuminati family, and I believe that and I believe Christ showed me this, that I was test tube baby or a batch baby,
Yeah.
embryos genetically modified and all kinds of genetic heritage that we have to deal with. And then birthed in a surrogate mother that I don't think survived the birth, and then raised in a surrogate family that
Mhm.
was the fundamental Christian group, and I think that they had some heritage. Both parents had Illuminati heritage. I'm pretty sure about that. SRA,
Mhm.
although I don't know how conscious they were of it. I
Yeah.
certainly wasn't. But they both wanted to be good people. Then there's all that underlying altar thing that you the front part of you remembers
Mhm.
a certain regimented, defined belief system, and then there's other parts of you that are taken and done, things with and programmed to do that. Uh, but when I was probably around 12, 14, as I remember, I think that I was SRA had done what they wanted, and I think the intention all along was to go into military programming, and there are a lot of different special unacknowledged access programs in the military, and children are taken in there, and they're used in a lot of different ways. I don't have a lot of clarity on what necessarily I was used for up until probably mid 20s. I think I was used quite a bit, and there were times that I can know I moved around a lot, but
Mhm.
each place I lived in, I remember one day there, and I don't remember certain parts of it. I have very skimpy memories of that. So I in my middle 20s, I attended a church and was part of the singles group there. One of the young men there said that I didn't have personality. I mean, and I can see, that's true.
Yeah.
I even now I'm very restrained,
Mhm.
less so now than I would have been back then,
Yeah.
but unable to really open up and have any kind of relationships. And I've always been single, always lived by myself. That I believe that kept me accessible
Yeah.
to whenever they wanted me. I was available, and there was no one living with me that might add to any suspicion or whatever like that. I think as I'm looking at it, there's a lot of varied ways that I believe that I was used and programmed. And I've asked a lot about, well, am I still being used? Was I used when I was in my 50s, in my 40s, in my 30s? So I started with the questions of muscle testing because I didn't trust my inner voice at
Yeah.
all. And I always wondered, well, when people say they hear God talking to them or they hear the Lord speaking to them, I didn't trust that
Yeah.
because I didn't. I just I feel like that. I mean, I didn't know why then that I didn't trust it. But now I think there are altars programmed to step in as a false Jesus or
Yeah.
whatever. And then there's also the voice to skull programming, the V2K, which may have been some of that. It's not anything that's super clear to me now. I think that this front presenting part of myself, maybe there's core me in there, or maybe there's not. I don't know, but I have worked very hard to have a job, support myself. I always felt like I'm right on the fringes of being one of those people on a corner having to beg for money, of not having the backup, and so always had to work hard, always, and that was on the priority to me is work hard, make a living, support yourself, have a home, and all of this is, self reliance,
Yeah.
which I know we can, that Jesus and is there, that God has promised us to be there for us, and largely connecting with that. But I do have times when I think that I have to step back and say, is what I'm looking at accurate and true,
Yeah.
and all of that.
I think it's important for survivors to do that, and I still do that. And so I'll just use an example is actually this weekend I was working through some things, and when I woke up one morning, the word that was coming was Papa, which, there's people who use that name for God, Papa God, and things like that. I had a step grandpa, and he went by Papa, and he wasn't a nice man. And so then there was a little bit of that confusion to go, okay, you know, is this truly Papa God that, or is it not? And I took some time to kind of sort it out and to work through some prayers until I was confident that who I was talking to was true, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so I believe that even when we've done a lot of work, there's times when we want to, just double check, and that God doesn't have a problem with us double checking. In fact, he says, test the spirits. And like you mentioned, sometimes our parts are meant to be a counterfeit or false Jesus or false God within us. That's their role and that's their job. And so we don't need to be afraid of that. So I just want to encourage people who are listening that this is normal and we get to process it out.
Very encouraging to know that we can do that, because I do it a lot. When I first started looking at this, and I did the muscle testing, and I would journal, and it was, these journals are full of the questions and the answers to the muscle testing, and then I double checking, is
Mm-hmm.
that answer right, and and repeating that with just just because I didn't trust the answers I was getting, because there's so much subterfuge and so much distraction, and I mean, there are so many ways that are used to keep us confused and keep us from finding the truth of our experience. Now, one of the things that I did to start with very early on is I created within myself an encounter space, and I would close my eyes and meditate, and I would have a place I would sit, and then I kind of created a place. Well, over here could be kind of like a portal if something wants to come through there. And then there's another place over this other way where it's a gate to where a bunch of altars were, and
Mm-hmm.
all that. And so the first time I did this, bulky looking Frankenstein almost built military kind of man came through the portal, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't get very close. I didn't allow him to get close, but I have some artwork that kind of depicts the military with the big little square head and the great big
Mm-hmm.
bulky square shoulders, and
We can
that
share
with this,
that.
if you have it and want to. So similar to this, or really more like the guy in the background,
Okay.
the big bulky. Well, this guy wearing something, a gray suit. I didn't see any military markings, and I was wary that. So I just, and he didn't say anything. I was giving him opportunity to say something, but it was like he was mute. And then he got down on one knee. He had a box, and he did something. And at that point in time, it was like I had a really bad LSD trip. I mean,
Hmm.
it was very uncomfortable, and I backed out of that really quickly, and I had to, go outside, and just regroup. And so I thought, okay, so now I need to have some rules and regulations with this experience, and so I did that, and I would ask angels to help, and I don't remember if I ever actually asked Jesus. I might have. So that I did that a lot, and I had a lot of different figures, whatever kind of figure that wanted to come, whether it made sense or not,
Mm-hmm.
would come, and then I would work with it, and I would whatever they brought, we would, if they had something in their hand, I would set it on the work table. We'd look at it, we'd take it apart, whatever came from it. So that was one of the ways that I processed this, and then anything in that I didn't want to keep, I put it in a bag, gave it to the
Yeah.
angels, sent it off, and so forth.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
We need
yeah,
a safe place to work through this, and so we do a similar thing where we have encounter time with the true family, and again, being sensitive to if there is severe programming with Jesus, we don't want Jesus there in the sense of scaring you or the parts or triggering more programming. Obviously, he's here, but sometimes we will invite the Lion of the Tribe of Judah or the Lamb of God, into that place if there is resistance. But our heart is to have that safe space where you can work through these things. And some survivors are more comfortable indoors and some are more comfortable outdoors. And it kind of depends on what kind of trauma. I'm more of an indoor person, so I kind of have in this season it's the white cottage, and there's a fireplace and couches and just places where I can interact with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and then any parts that need help. And we can work through that. So I'm just curious with the military figures, did you feel that that was an internal part that was programmed to believe it was a military leader? Or did you feel that that was part of memory processing of actual events?
I mean, I think both to a degree, but more so memory processing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, you may not have this piece of art anymore. I think I sent it to you, but this was like a 14-year-old female looking in the back, which was me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that in that time, I had a lot of beatings, and that was part of the programming back then.
Okay.
And it was a particular altar that would be called up to take the beatings because they were making a super tough altar. And I do think I have or had military grade altars that were
Yeah.
used for military type missions. And I gave you, and there is a piece of art where it's like the beating is in process, but that was uh just part of the military thing.
And for people who may not be familiar with this may feel like, how could all of this happen, and why do people do these things? And yet it is for that control, as well as experiments. I don't know all of your experience with the military, but I know there was missions that I would be sent on to do certain jobs or do certain things or decoding. um, I was used a lot in the intelligence, more in the intelligence side of military than anything else. But that torture and that beatings were to, you know, get you to do certain things and to keep it hidden, and secret. And so it's not easy to unravel these things. And every single part of us is important and loved by God and is a valuable part of us. Some people have a misunderstanding that we can just get rid of parts. Well, no, they're part of us. And so it's that coming together and learning how to cooperate and learning how to do things in a new way, that precious part doesn't have to experience those beatings. And part of the way that they reinforce the programming is they'll often have a part that is the punisher part and is actually maybe today punishing you if the don't tell kind of programming is, you can get some backlash and some things from that, or parts who don't want to because they know they're going to get beaten like that. And so even though it may be a lot in the past, there may be still internal parts that are active and think that, they're getting beaten and so on.
Yeah, and when I've had some of the memories, some of the SRA type memories even, and there's they're horrific and gruesome and gory and all of that, but I do it from a dissociated place and I have no emotion at all when I'm looking at it. And now later on I might have a little bit, but I have worked really hard to be able to live a
Mhm.
fairly normal life.
Yeah.
And it's but the thing that I've got to work with now is all of these parts that were heavily suppressed,
Yeah.
and some of them are suppressed by the military people who didn't want them out. You only come out with this code
Yep.
and so forth. But there and I spent most of my life feeling like I was blocked from a large part of myself.
Yeah.
Feeling like I'm intelligent. I should be able to do more than this.
Mhm.
I came back. I worked at McDonald's when I was,
Mhm.
and I haven't had the kind of job that I felt like I could have had because I know I'm intelligent, but I wasn't able to access it or use it, and so there's all kinds of blocks, and I've got all of this stuff that I need to look at and bring forward, And so at this point in time in my life, it's like, yes, I need that true family to do
Yeah.
this, because I'm at a point where I'm not going any further without that. It's
Yeah.
just going to be a circle, around and around.
Yeah.
And so, I realize that's something that I need.
Yeah, and talking about skills and so on, and is I know many survivors are programmed to be limited in capacity, and it's hard because like you said, you're intelligent and all of those kinds of things. And for me, I was always clumsy, and uh, you know, I hand coordination was horrible. But recently we went on a family trip, and I think it's because of the healing I've been walking through. But the boys were throwing around a football and wanted me to engage with them, and I was like, wow, I could catch pretty well, and using my right hand and my left hand. And so, the beauty of the healing journey is we get to recapture those parts of us that were segmented off and that were used for certain jobs. And now, the Lord is wanting us to have that restored, through relationship with them so that we can walk out the fullness of who we are. That's the beauty. This isn't an easy journey. And like you talked about dissociation, and it's easier to be dissociated. You know, I went on a trip recently, and it used to be travel was no big deal. I wouldn't get triggered with anything because I had one of my primary parts, strong girl, that she would just lock everybody else up, who might be triggered by something, and keep everybody calm and cool. And we could just do whatever we needed to do. Well, this last trip, because I'm learning not to have all that happen. And, there was a lot of triggering that happened and a lot of emotion. And it was an adjustment to go, oh, okay, now I've got to learn how to walk it out in a new way, not this stoic dissociated, and also not just being not able to handle things because the emotions are so big, but this place here with the true family where we are able to be present in our situations, and that we're able to appropriately walk through the emotions and not be completely shut down. And so, it's a journey.
Yeah, yeah. I At one point I was thinking about just not doing this. I can stop. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'll just take. And I had one of my little parts. She just came forward and she was just bawling a heart.
Mhm.
She just bawling. She says, "I want people to know. I
Yeah.
want people to know." And I've done a series of videos with using my art. I've done a lot of art in the process of the therapy, or personal therapy, really. And it is a little daunting to think about all of these emotions that are there.
Mhm.
This gigantic well of unshed
Yep.
tears. So that's where having, the help of God
Yeah.
uh, is really, it's necessary. It's an absolute, or I couldn't do it.
It's the
And
only
and
way
I'm at
through.
yeah, yeah, and it's I'm at the beginning, really. I've done about 4 years, something like that, of work, but I'm at a point where I've got to go further into it.
Yeah.
So
And there's a certain amount of work that we can do on our own. And then there is a place where we need community to walk this journey out. A lot of people don't understand why that's necessary. And it's hard for survivors to connect in groups. And so we are starting a new transformation group in January. It can be challenging to be in a group of other people who have experienced trauma. There can be triggering and different things that happen. And yet, so often because of the trauma and stuff, we've lost or didn't develop relational skills, and we're wounded in relationship and we're healed in relationship, and so we need one another as we walk out this journey. And so I just really honor your courage for coming to this place of recognizing you're ready for more. with the true family and in community. It's beautiful.
And I've kind of felt like that what I've been doing is I'm standing over here and
Mhm.
I'm looking at a pit, and
Mhm.
this pit is where all of that yucky pain, sorrow, horror, all of that. And I'm over here and I'm just looking at it. And that's when I have had these periods of deep emotional angst and no idea where they came from, no idea why I was having them or what they were connected with. But I just knew that I needed to keep it over there and
Mhm.
not go into it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. One day I thought, I'm just going to go into it. I'm going
Mhm.
to go in, I'm going to dive in that pit and look. And so I got on the bed, got covered up, and started to do it. And my cat attacked my feet, and
Really?
that's the only time she's ever done that. And I thought, well, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to
Let's
do
do.
this right now.
Well, and that's part of doing it alone isn't a good space to do it in, but when we do it with the true family, and recently I was dealing with the black hole, a couple of them. One was anger and the other was rage. And Jesus was willing to go in and clean out that hole. And, my parts were like, oh no, he's going to get dirty or he's going to get defiled here, but that type of thing, but he's not. Um, and he was able to go in there and do some cleanup work. And that's the beauty of doing this with Jesus, with Holy Spirit, with Father, true Father, is that we have that opportunity. We're not alone. And that's what, my journaling, they remind me over and over, you're not alone. We're here. Even in those times when we feel like, God, I can't find you. You feel a million miles away. All of those kinds of things is they are always there, and they have solutions, and they just want to be with us, and love us, and help us to experience something different in relationship. And that's one of the things, is feeling so crippled in relationship because we never had a chance to really know what it means to be loved just for us, and not for as a tool, as a performance, and all of these other things that we were used for, but to be genuinely loved just for who we are. And so it's never too late. We get to do that now. That's the beauty of the journey, is getting out of isolation into healthy community and learning and growing into the true family. Would you like to take a look at some of these other pictures and tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, why don't we? Yeah, that one is I was thinking about timelines, and that's one of the things that I was encouraged to do on several occasions is to actually write out timelines and to look at. And this one was just it was abstract. I tend to be very visual, and I'm not very verbal, and sounds have been used for programming, so I'm the auditory are affecting. But this just the bottom right, was birth, and all the little things that I went through up until uh, this is all the way up until about age 14, and
Mm-hmm.
that middle part with the wheel, that was like from what 5 to 12, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I forget, but I think there was probably a lot of children when they're probably 4 or 5 will be taken into these programming rooms, labs, and you're put on a table and you're experimented on, you're given drugs, you're
Mm-hmm.
given, all of that kind of thing. And that's kind of what this was,
Mm-hmm.
is just a way of exploring that.
Yeah. And it's a good idea to do the timeline. And I think then, part of that processing also can be going back and seeing how true Jesus, washes that with his blood, and where they are at each of those pivotal places of pain, because they want to meet us in that place, that we were never alone, we were never abandoned, that they were there. Um, and that they sustained us. And that's, the reason we're alive today. And I don't know about you, but I died many times, I was, and, resuscitated and so on. And so, or brought back to life. One particular time where Jesus actually raised me from the dead, and they all thought I was dead. They were done with me, but God wasn't done with me, you know. And so we get to celebrate the life that they have given to us. It's beautiful.
And working on the forgiveness part of going back to some of those uh, places and experiences, and actually forgiving them. And I haven't done that. I've there's a lot of work to do in that arena.
And it's a beautiful part of our healing that we get to do, as we're ready. There we can make the choice to forgive, but often there's a lot of layers in the processing of it, and so we have grace for ourselves. And a question I often get from survivors is they are frustrated because, like, I forgave them, but I'm still angry. And to understand that forgiveness, is, I believe, separate from our emotions, in the sense that it's not that we haven't forgiven, it's that we're still dealing with layers. We get to choose to forgive as a part of our will, and that's releasing us from that bondage, because when we hold that unforgiveness, it ties us in, with our abusers. But making that choice to forgive sets us free. And then we have a journey of processing. I'm at various spaces with different, things in, perpetrators in my life. There's some that, I feel I've made a huge process to where, I can genuinely say, Jesus said to love our enemies, that I love them. But there's others that I'm not there yet. And it's not like I've got to force myself to love them because Jesus said to love them. No, that's not what he's asking us to do. It's this gentle journey with them. Today, I might be okay with it. And tomorrow, I may be struggling. And they don't have a problem with that. They're not angry or displeased or disappointed in us. And that's the beauty of this journey, is we just get to walk it out step by step with them.
That one, it's splitting. Fracturing is actually what I titled that. I've heard some people say that that once you're if you're a child, that's when you split. They can split you off as a child. But I think, at least my feeling is, that even as an older person,
Mm-hmm.
maybe early teens or so, that with severe torture you can still be split
Yes.
and fractured, and that this is kind of what this depicts. And electroshock is part of that, severe electroshock, and parts of the self splitting off. And then, do they have the technology to collect these parts that escape, that are
Yeah.
that go off? I don't know. I know there's certainly, and then that little figure, that kind of like a whirl with the hooks on it.
Yes.
To me, that's like a symbol of a satanic presence during those
Okay.
situations. That was always part of it. Was that satanic, demonic type presence.
Yeah.
So
And that's often hard for, especially Christian survivors to walk through, because there can be so much stigma and, oh, you're evil, oh, you're bad, and all of those kinds of things. When we can just understand that in that severe, severe, severe trauma that we all went through, that's going to be par for the course in our recovery, and not to be ashamed of that, but to know that we have the victory through the true Lord Jesus, and that it's a process. And I believe as we work with the parts, deliverance happens much easier and quicker, because, a lot of those parts agreed to some things. And oftentimes it was, they were being tortured, and they said, if you accept help from this demon, the torture will stop. Well, when you're being electrocuted, when you're being beaten, there comes a point where you say, whatever, whatever, no guilt and shame. Jesus came to set the captives free. And so we get to work layer by layer by layer through these. And I believe in the meantime, the Lord covers us with his righteousness, with his goodness, with his love. And so I just want to encourage survivors not to feel like, you're less than, you are, not a Christian, or all of those things that the enemy wants to, get us to believe, but to know that this is a journey and there is a way through. A lot of the deliverance that some churches do, in this big exorcism and shouting and yelling, and, sometimes it causes more trauma to the survivor. I know the first time I went through deliverance in the more traditional way, I stopped them halfway through and I was like, "Are you mad at me?" Because they were like, "Ah," and they were loud and noisy. And, my parts were just like, "These are my friends, but now I feel like, you hate me." And so just understanding that Jesus is so gentle and tender with us, on this journey, the true Jesus, and that we get to walk through this with victory, and with dignity. Jesus always, whether he was casting out demons, working with women or prostitutes or tax collectors or whatever, always had dignity for the person. And so we want to be sure that we're operating in that as well, and dignity for each one of our parts. So,
And I think that as we work through what we need to work through, we're not only doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for others.
yes,
It's like we're trailblazing, and
yes,
there have been others that have done it before me, and
yeah,
it's made it easier for me to do it. And so it's just getting better. The more of us that work through our stuff
mhm,
and with integrity and bringing the Lord into this equation of working through our stuff, it,
mhm,
it's 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 just exponentially going to open up.
yeah,
And you've said, and I've heard other people say that there's going to be a lot of people waking up,
yes,
and I've heard from you know various sources that in the United States alone there's 10 million mind control slaves
yeah,
or more,
yeah,
and these people are going to start waking up, and they're going to need some help.
yes, yes.
So,
I believe we're being prepared and we're part of that. Um, so that's so beautiful. All right, here is another one. And this may be a continuation of what we were just talking about, because obviously with that serpent.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's the SRA thing, and recently have kind of uh, become aware of the sex magic component. That was a lot of what we were used for and what was done to us, and a heavily demonic environment. I don't know exactly the words, but this is the child in that environment of severe ritual abuse and just the thick heaviness of evil there. That's what that's about.
These drawings are helpful, can be helpful, and were helpful for you in processing, the memories. And I know that they can be triggering, but also they can be helpful to survivors if they're in a safe place with the true family to process and to go deep with them. So, and let's see, here is another one.
I had dreams about a pool like that several times in my young years, and even some when I was a little older. And this was a very deep pool, and it was always filled with dread. The
Hmm.
the feeling I would have with it, and I believe that I did drown there several times. And up on the left, you see the little red table and the kind of the red building. That was their resuscitation area. Drag me out who knows how many times and resuscitate. And part of that dream that I would have is in that lower left corner. You see the dark area. Is I dreamed that I had to go that there was a tunnel filled with water, but that tunnel would go down from this pool, and I would
Hmm.
have to go down in it. I didn't have scuba gear. I think that they were trying to teach me how to breathe underwater.
Yeah.
I don't know details about that, but I've gotten some hints that there was an altar, most most likely one altar that trained for that. It's
Yeah.
extremely difficult on you physically to go through that. Took some time to recover from that physically.
Yeah. I have some memories too with, and mine was more ocean, but seas, different bodies of water where, as a little child, trained to breathe underwater. And again, I believe part of that was demonic, that they would breathe for us so that we could do some of that. And so again, that very intense, processing. But we could go through underwater tunnels. We could get into places that adults could not go. And so I do remember, some of that training, and that because they were supplying the breath, if I didn't do what they wanted me to do, then they would take it away. So if you can imagine being underwater and all of a sudden you can't breathe, it's a panic situation. And then oftentimes it's a setup. They have someone rescue you, and then you're loyalty bonded to that person because they saved your life, supposedly. When you're a little child, you don't understand. I mean, that's the reality that um, and so we tend to just go along with it and not understand what's actually happening.
One of the things that I would remember, even before before I started with this stuff of SRA and military and all of that, would be something like sensory deprivation of being wrapped up tight, eyes, ears covered, and you're wrapped so tight that you had to struggle to breathe. And there's when you're in sensory deprivation long enough, and there are different ways to do it. Some are you float in a pool of water
Mm-hmm.
and you can't move, or else you get shocked or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
but what I remember more for me was being wrapped really tightly, eyes and ears covered, and for long periods of time. And I think that primed uh, me or whoever is experiencing this. It sets you in a certain psychic uh, position. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but it makes you open and vulnerable to whatever they want to use you for. And this talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the shapes of programming is what I'm going to call them:
Mm-hmm.
spheres and cubes, and you put things in those things too, um, portals and all of that. And the three, I forget what you call those things right now, I'm drawing a blank, but the symbols of the phallus,
Yes.
the sexual aspect of the sex magic, that when you've been in sensory deprivation, sex magic can be extremely powerful. But that it's a huge violation,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I experienced that on several occasions. And one of the memories that I have about that is underwater, of that being done like a pod kind of thing. And this one was a lengthy bout of sensory deprivation. And I'll even have physical responses even now. I mean, I'm not right now, but if I really think about it, I have physical responses to this. And this underwater event was to open a portal. That was what I recall the purpose being. And so days of sensory deprivation and satanic ritual and all of this combined to open a portal.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And how is your journey with the Lord strengthening as you're processing, or what is He doing in your life today that's transformative?
Well, realizing that relationship is really important, and uh, relationship not just with other people, which I have been very lacking
Mhm.
in being able to do, but having the relationship with God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as family, and as a connection, a way that I can connect and be part of that in itself it's a necessary part of my future journey. I'll say that.
And that's the thing is we're all in process. It's day by day, and we are all growing in that relationship. And I thought, being raised a Christian, I had a, relationship with the Lord, and I did to the capacity that I had at that time. But what we're looking for in this healing process and journey is that being able to sense, feel, hear, see, his love for us, the true family's love for us, because that is the only thing that will fill in all of the gaps, and the understanding that he has an amazing restoration of everything that we went through. And that's what I hang on to, because if it wasn't for that, when these memories surface and, the horrendous stuff that we face, it's like, just, I don't want to live anymore, you know, but they remind me regularly of their, um, their restoration. They'll say, remember who you are, remember why you're here. And I believe we are called for such a time as this. And you sharing your story today has impact. Sharing your artwork can help to trigger some memories potentially for someone who needs that next step to process with true family. And a lot of times, triggering is seen as bad, and it can be if we don't have that safe place with the true family to process. But behind every trigger, there's treasure, because there's parts restored. There's gifts and abilities that get to be, restored, things cleansed out and healing. And so that's why I believe this journey is so worth it. And so I just want to honor you, Reba, today. Thank you for sharing your story in such a beautiful way.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you for being here on Testimony Mountain, and encourage you to share this with those who it may be beneficial to. And we'll see you next time on Testimony Mountain.